guys, in this video lecture we will discuss about the neuroglial cell. So first of all, what the neuroglial cell is. As we know that our nervous system that is mainly control most of the activity of our body. Now this nervous system it is mainly composed of two parts. Now the part that is mainly provide the structure and functional support to the nervous system. Now this part of the nervous system it is called as neuron. While this nervous system it also contains some other parts. Now this part of the nervous system which mainly support the nervous system, this part of the nervous system it is called as neuroglia. Now in this video lecture we will mainly focus on this neuroglia, while the neuron we have discussed in the previous video lectures. Now let us talk about the neuroglial cell. Now let us learn about the neuroglial cells. So first of all, these what the neuroglial cell is. First we will define this cell is. So the first one, that is definition. So neuroglial cell are actually the supportive cell of the nervous system. As we have already discussed in the introduction, so nervous system it will perform various activity, it will perform many functions in our body. Now to work properly this nervous system it will need a support. So this support it is mainly provided by the cell that is called as neuroglial cell. Now look at the second definition of the neuroglial cell. So neuroglia are actually the non-excitable cell and does not transmit the nerve impulse. So neuroglial cell are actually the non-excitable cell. So as the neuron are actually the excitable cell, but these neuroglia are actually the non-excitable cell. It means that they are unable to transmit the nerve impulse. So this non-excitable cell of the nervous system it is called as neuroglial cell. Now the second one, that is about the etymology of the neuroglia. So neuroglia it is actually derived from the two Greek words. The first one, that is neuro, which indicate that is neuron, while the second term, that is glia, which mean glue. So what does it indicate? That the neuron glue actually it is supposed that these glia cells are actually hold the neuron together. So that's why it is called as glue cells. Now, if we talk about the discovery of the neuroglial cell, so neuroglia cell for the first time discovered by the Rudolf Virchow. So this scientist proposed that neuroglia cells are actually as a connective tissue present mainly in the brain and spinal cords. So this is about the discovery of the neuroglial cell. The other terms are names used for the neuroglial cell. So this neuroglial cell it is called as non-neural cell are actually the glial cell. So these are actually the others name used for the neuroglial cell. Now if we talk about the location where this neuroglial cell are present, Rudolf Virchow it is also known for the one of the most important statement in the cell theory, that is omnis cellula e cellula. So this term is also coined by the Rudolf Virchow. This means that new cell arise from the pre-existing cell. We will discuss where these neuroglial cells are found in our bodies. So these neuroglial cells are actually found in the central nervous system, which mainly include the spinal cord and brains, and it is also found in the peripheral nervous system. Now the next one, that is about the origin of the neuroglial cell. So I'll write in the embryonic stage, the embryo possesses three layers. One is the outermost layer of the embryo, that is called as ectoderms, while the middle layer of the embryo it is called as mesoderm, while the innermost layer of the embryo it is called as ectoderms. So mainly the ectoderm that is responsible for the formation of the neuroglial cell, as our whole of the nervous system it is made from the ectodermal layer of the embryo. But here the exception it is exist. So the microglial cell that are actually the neuroglial cell are the glial cell, which is mainly derived from the mesodermal layers of the embryo. So this is actually a specialized type of the WBC, which is actually have the origin of mesodermals. Now if we talk about the size of the neuroglial cell or the glial cell, so actually the largest neuroglial cell are actually the astrocytes. So astrocytes is mainly a neuroglial cell that are actually the largest in size, and these are actually the most abundant neuroglial cell in our body. So it is largest as well as the most abundant neuroglial cell, while the microglial cell that are have the origin of mesoderm, these are actually the smallest neuroglial cell. So these are actually smallest microglial cell are actually the smallest neuroglial cell. Now we will see here the number of the neuroglial cell found in our nervous systems. So actually it was earlier thought that the number of the glial cell are actually was many times greater than the number of the neurons, but according to the recent studies involving many sophisticated techniques by the Sonsa and Herculana, he concluded that mainly our whole brain it will process 86.1 millions of the neuron, while it possesses the 84.6 million of the glial cell. Now, another point related to the neuroglial cell, that is actually the glioma. So glioma are basically the brain tumor which is mainly arise from the neuroglia. So such type of the brain tumor are called as glioma. So first of all, what is tumor? So tumor is basically a group of abnormal cell. Now this group of abnormal cell that is mainly called as tumor. Now when this group of abnormal cell that is mainly found in the brain, now such type of the tumor are called as brain tumor. When the formation of this abnormal group of cell that is arise due to the neuroglial cell, or you can say the reaction for the formation of the tumor cell that is occur in the neuroglial cell, now such type of the brain tumor are called as glioma. Now what is the important characteristics or feature of the neuroglial cell, or you can say what is the difference exists between the neuron and neuroglial cell? So here are the important characteristics of the neuroglial cell. So the first one, that is the neuroglial cell lack axon and dendrites. So as we know that the axon and dendrites that are basically the cytoplasmic extension of the neurons, which is mainly arise from the cell body of the neuron. Now here in case of this neuroglial cell, a complex type of the process arises from the cell body, or you can say the center of the neuroglial cells, but they are not considered as axon and dendrites. So here there is no concept of axon and dendrites. So this is the first difference, or you can say the characteristics of the neuroglial cell. Now the second characteristics, that is they can divide and multiply. As we have studied already in the lecture of the neurons, so neurons are basically unable to divide because of the absence of the centrosomes, which is mainly organally responsible for the division of the cell. So no centrosome, so that's why neuron can, and that's why neuron is unable to divide. But here the neuroglial cell have the ability to divide and multiplies. Now the third characteristics of the neuroglial cell, that is they surround the neuron, providing support and insulations. As we have already talked about the nervous system, that the protection or support to the nervous system that is provided by the neuroglial cell. Now these neuroglial cells are basically surround the neuron. So neuron is basically the functional and structure unit of the nervous system. So these neuroglial cells are basically surround the structure and functional unit of the nervous system. So by surrounding the neuron, it will provide support from any type of the injuries and provide the insulation to the neuron. So by this way neuroglial cell that is able to provide support to the nervous systems. Now the fourth characteristics of the neuroglial cell, that is they increase the transduction speed by myelination of axons. So axons are basically the long cytoplasmic extension of the neurons. Now this long cytoplasmic extension of the neuron are basically covered by the neuroglial cells. Now two types of the neuroglial cell that provide myelination to the axon of the neurons. The first one that is mainly found in the central nervous system, that is oligodendrocytes, that are basically the type of the neuroglial cell which provide myelination in case of the central nervous system. But in case of the peripheral nervous system, a special type of the neuroglial cell that is called as Schwann cell. Now these Schwann cell and the peripheral nervous system, they will able to provide myelination, or they will able to provide myelination to the axon of the neurons. Now this is actually the structure of the axon. Now the axon is basically covered with these neuroglial cells. So this is actually the life of routine that is mainly surround the structure of the axon. Now this myelin sheet, or you can say myelination, or you can say the life of routine, it will provide it insulation to the axon of the neurons. So when nerve impulse it is come to the axons, so here's this insulation is provided by the neuroglial cell, due to which the speed of conduction it will increase in these axons. So that's why the speed of conduction it will increase by the neuroglial cells, which is the important characteristics of the neuroglial cell. Now the fifth characteristics of the neuroglial cell, that is they cannot transmit the nerve impulse, as the neuron are able to transmit the nerve impulse, but here they will only increase the transduction speed in case of the neurons itself neuroglial cell that are unable to transmit the nerve impulse. Now the last characteristics of the neuroglial cell, that is they possess no synaptic contacts. So first of all, what is synapse? Synapse is basically the functional connection between the neuron and other structures. This is basically the synapse. So neurons are able to form the synapse, but in case of the neuroglial cell, there is no connection exist between the neuroglial cell and some other structures. So this is the important characteristics of the neuroglial cell. Now what is the function of the neuroglial cell in our nervous systems? Now the function of the neuroglial cell that we will discuss in detail and the type of the neuroglial cell. But here we will summarize the overall function of the neuroglial cell that is performed by the neuroglial cell in our nervous systems. Now the first function, that is they are important for the development and maintenance of the nervous systems, as we have already talked about this neuroglial cell that will able to provide support to our nervous system. So by this way, this neuroglial cell that is responsible for the development and maintenance of the nervous systems. Now the second function, that is produce myelins. So neuroglial cell that is able to provide myelin, a life of routines that is found in the axon of the neurons. So this myelin it will able to provide insulation to the axon of the neurons. So what is the function of this myelin? So this myelin it is able to increase the speed of conductions. So by this way, neuroglial cell it will increase the speed of conduction in the axon of the neurons. Now the third important characteristics of the neuroglial cell, that is protecting neuron from the harmful substances. As we know that our blood vessel it will possess various type of the microorganisms and pathogens that are circulate in our blood vessels. Now these pathogens and microorganism it will come to our nervous system and damage our nervous system. but here the nervous system it is protected because of these neuroglial cell which which will able to cause the barrier between the capillaries and the nervous system. So by this way the neuroglial cell it is able to protect our nervous systems from the harmful substances. So this is the important overall function of the neuroglial cells. Now here we will discuss the classification of the neuroglial cells. So basically the neuroglial cell it is divided into the two categories. The first one that is central neuroglial cells, while the second one that is peripheral neuroglial cells. This classification mainly based on the location where these neuroglial cells are found. So when this neuroglial cell it is found in our central nervous system. Now such type of the neuroglial cell they are called as central neuroglial cells, or you can say the neuroglial cell that is mainly found in our brain and spinal cord. So such type of the neuroglial cell are called as central neuroglial cells. So here are the important neuroglial cell that is found in our central nervous system. The first one that is astrocyte, the second one that is oligodendrocytes, the third one that is microglial cells, and the fourth one that is ependymal cells. So these are basically the type of the neuroglial cell which is found in our central nervous systems. Now the second category of the neuroglial cell that is peripheral neuroglial cells. The neuroglial cell which is basically present in our peripheral nervous system they are called as peripheral neuroglial cells. So Schwann cell and satellite cell these are the specialized type of the neuroglial cell which is found in our peripheral nervous systems. Now we will discuss each type of the neuroglial cell and details. Now the first type of the central neuroglial cell that is about the astrocyte. Now if we look to the structure of the neuroglial cells, so these neuroglial cells that are basically look like the shape of the stars. So that's why these cells are called as astrocytes. So these are basically the star-shaped neuroglial cells. If we talk about the location of the astrocytes, so these are basically widely distributed in all parts of the brains. So mainly astrocytes they are located in the brains. So next point related to the astrocyte that is about the astrocytosis or sclerosis. Now what happened in this process? So first of all we will learn this whole process through diagram and then we will read this sentence. Now here these are actually the structure of the neurons. So this neuron it will possess the central part which is responsible for the maintenance of the neuron. This central part of the neuron it is called as soma. So here a small cytoplasmic extension arises. These are basically the dendrites. So long cytoplasmic extension that are mainly arise from the cell body this is called as axons, while this is the axon terminals. So what happens when this neuron it is damaged or injured? So in this case here the astrocyte cell are come here. Now in this place the astrocyte here secretes some hardened masses, or you can say the soft tissue which will occupy the space which will occupy this place which is once occupied by the neurons. Now this process in which the astrocytes secrete some hardened masses or form some hardened masses to replace that place which is once occupied by the neuron. This process is called astrocytosis, or you can say the sclerosis. Now look at the sentence. When neurons are damaged or injured, astrocytes form hardened masses of soft tissue and fill that place formerly occupied by the neuron. Now this process is basically called as astrocytosis or sclerosis. Now in the human brain there are two types of the astrocyte are found in the human brains. The first one that is fibrous astrocyte, while the second one that is protoplasmic astrocytes. So basically these fibrous astrocytes that are mainly found, are abundantly found in the white matter of the brains, although a small amount of the fibrous astrocyte also found in the gray matter of the brains, while the protoplasmic astrocytes that are mainly found in the gray matter of the brains. Now this is basically the structure of the two type of the astrocyte. The first one here, this is the structure of the protoplasmic astrocyte, as this astrocyte is mainly found in the gray matter of the brains. So here this is the nucleus, while this is the main soma, or you can say the main body of this astrocyte. Here are the complex extension or process of this astrocyte cell. So this is protoplasmic astrocyte, while this is the structure of the fibrous astrocytes. So you can see here this is the nucleus, while this is the main body, and here is the complex type of the process arise from this main bodies. So these fibrous astrocyte mainly found in the white matter of the brains. So this is the structure representation of this both type of the astrocyte. Now what is the function of the astrocytes? So here are the various important function of the astrocytes. So the first function of the astrocyte, they will form blood-brain barriers. Now what is blood-brain barriers? So blood-brain barrier are basically the neuroprotective structure that prevent the brain from the various type of the pathogens. Now how this blood barrier it is formed by the astrocytes. So look at here, this is actually the capillary. The red color it will show the capillary. So this is the blood capillary, while the center of this blood capillary it is called as lumen. And other tissue what happen, so this blood capillary, the blood capillary it will possess various type of the pathogens and microorganism. So in other tissue, microorganism and the blood capillary it will move out from the capillary and will cause various type of the infection and the other tissues. But in case of the brains, here the blood capillary it will surrounded by the process of the astrocytes, due to which the microorganism it is unable to move out from the capillary and will cause infection in the brain tissue. So due to this process of the astrocyte, the brain it is protected from the microorganism and infections. So due to blood-brain barrier, there is rarely infection occur in the blood and the brain tissues. Now look at this sentence: form blood-brain barrier and therefore regulate the entry of substance or microorganism from the blood into the brains. So this is actually form the blood-brain barrier, due to which the brain is protected from the microorganism and pathogens. Now the second function of the astrocyte that are twist around the nerve cell. These astrocytes are basically surround the nerve cell, due to which it will protect the brain and spinal cord from the injuries. So this is the second function of the astrocyte. Now the third function, that is regulate neurotransmitter level and synapse and recycling of neurotransmitter due to synaptic transmission. Now what does this sentence mean? Now look at this structure. So this is actually the axon of the neurons. So here when the message is come here, so as we know that the neuron and the nervous system that are not directly connected with each others, so the space that is exists between the two neurons, now this place it is called a synaptic cleft. The place between two neurons are called synaptic clefts. So the neuron that is present before the synapse it is called as pre-synaptic neuron, while the neuron that is present after the synapse it is called as post-synaptic neuron. Now how the nerve transmit, it is transmitted from this neuron and to this neuron. So here the axon terminal of this presynaptic neuron, it will secrete some chemical messengers. These chemical messengers are basically called as neurotransmitters. So this neurotransmitter, it will able to transmit the nerve impulse from the presynaptic neuron and to the postsynaptic neuron. So by this way, the nerve impulse, it is transmitted from one neuron and to the other neurons. So what is the main function of the astrocyte and the nerve impulse? So when the message, it is carried from the presynaptic neuron and to the postsynaptic neurons, so here the neurotransmitter, there after the action of the neurotransmitter are left and the synaptic lefts. So recycling of neurotransmitter, while the level of the neurotransmitter, that is mainly regulated by these astrocyte cells. Now the fourth and last function of the astrocyte cell, that are basically it will able to secrete neurotrophins. So what are neurotransmitters? These are basically the protein molecules or substances. So this astrocyte, it will secrete the neurotrophins, a proteinous substances which promote the growth and function of the nervous systems. So this neurotransmitter, which is basically the protein substances, and these protein substances, it will promote the growth and function of the nervous system. So that's why we say that the neuroglial cells, that are actually the supportive structure or cell of the nervous systems. Now another type of the center neuroglial cell, that is microglial cells. So what are the microglial cells? So micro means small. So this is actually the smallest type of the neuroglial cells. So the smallest type of the neuroglial cell, that are basically the microglial cells. Now next point regarding to the microglial cell, that is derived from the monocytes. So monocytes are basically the type of the white blood cells. So these microglial cells, that are formed from the monocytes. We talk about the neuroglial cells. So neuroglial cells are basically the ectodermal and origins. They will formed from the ectodermal layers of the embryo. But here the microglial cell, that is actually the type of the neuroglial cell, it is originated from the mesodermal cell. So this microglial cell, it will show exception to the origin of the neuroglial cells. Now the third point, that is called as macrophages of the central nervous system. So why the microglial cell, that are called as macrophages of the central nervous systems? So as we know that this is actually the type of the white blood cells. When any type of the microorganism or pathogen that will enter our central nervous systems, so this microglial cell, it will act like a macrophages. So what is the function of macrophages? Macrophages are basically, it will engulf this type of the microorganism and pathogens. So this microglial cell, it will engulf this type of these microorganisms and pathogen, and will protect our central nervous system from these intruders. So that's why microglial cell, it is called as macrophages of the central nervous system. All of these 3 points, that is very important for the MCQ's point of views. So this is the structure representation of the microglial cell. This is the main body of the microglial cell, while these are the complex type of the process arise from their main bodies. So this is the structure representation of the microglial cells. Now what is the function of the microglial cells? So the first function, that is migrate to injured or infected area of the central nervous system and act as a miniature macrophages. As we know that since any type of the infection, that is mainly occur in our central nervous system, anywhere in the central nervous systems. So these microglial cell, it will act like a small macrophages and will come into the site of infection, and thus engulfs these microorganism and pathogen, and thus protect our central nervous system from these intruders. So the second function of this microglial cell, that is they provide immune and inflammatory response during the damage of the brain tissue. When anywhere in the brain tissue damage occurs, so these macrophages, they are microglial cell, they will protect our central nervous system and from these microorganisms, and thus provide an immuno and inflammatory response to these microorganisms and pathogens. So this is the function of the microglial cells. Now the third important type of the central neuroglial cell that are basically the oligodendrocyte cells. So what are the oligodendrocyte cell? So this oligodendrocyte, the main diagnostic characteristics of this oligodendrocyte cell is that they have a few processes. So that's why these cells are called as oligodendrocyte cells. But these few processes that are actually short and length. So this is the main feature of the oligodendrocyte cells. So another term that is used for the oligodendrocyte cell, that is called as oligodendroglia. So this is the other term used for the oligodendrocytes. Now you can see here, this is the structure of the oligodendrocyte cell. So it possesses a few processes, and these processes are actually short and length. So this is the overall structure of the oligodendrocyte cells. Now what is the function of the oligodendrocyte cell and our central nervous systems? So the first function of the oligodendrocyte cell, that is, it will able to produce myelination around the nerve fiber and the central nervous systems. So right in the central nervous system, the nerve fiber, it is surrounded by a life of proteins that is called myelin sheet, or you can say the myelination. So myelination in the central nervous system, it will produce by these oligodendrocyte cells. But in case of the peripheral nervous system, this myelination, it will produce by the Schwann cell. So this is the first function of the oligodendrocytes. Now the second function of the oligodendrocyte is that it will provide support to the central nervous system neuron. Now how they will able to support the central nervous system neuron? So by forming a semi-stiff connective tissue between the neurons. Now how they will able to protect or to support the central nervous system neuron? Actually they will form a connective tissue between the neuron. So by this way it will protect or support the neuron of the central nervous system. So this is about the oligodendrocytes. Now the last type of the central neuroglial cell, that is basically the ependymal cells. Now what is ependymal cells? So here are some of the important characteristics of ependymal cells. The first one, that is, they are actually this cuboidal to columnar shapes. So these are actually cuboidal or columnar in shapes. Now next point, that is, they are arranged in a single layer. So these columnar or cuboidal ependymal cells that are arranged in a single layers. Next characteristics, that is, it possesses the microvilli and cilia. So this is the important characteristics of the ependymal cells. Now what is the function of ependymal cell in our central nervous systems? The first function, that is, they line the cavity of the brain and spinal cords. So right in the brain, special type of the cavity is present. Now this cavity of the brain, it is called as ventricles. So ventricle are actually the cavity in the brains. So the term ventricle, it is also used for the chamber found in our hearts. So both of these, brain and heart, the term ventricle, it is used for both brain and hearts. But the main difference is that ventricle and brain, it means that the cavity of the brain, but in hearts it is used for the chamber of the hearts. So this is ventricle. Now what is the function of this ependymal cell and the ventricles? So right in the ventricles, subset of ependymal cell are present. Now this ependymal cell, it will form a choroid plexus. Now these choroid plexus that are responsible for the formation of cerebrospinal fluids. So mainly first it will line the cavity of the brain. So it means that they are present in the ventricles. So what is the function of this ependymal cell that is present in the ventricles? So it will secrete cerebrospinal fluids. So normally this cerebrospinal fluid, it will secreted by the choroid plexus, Now, what is the function of this cerebrospinal fluid and the brains? So actually it will protect our central nervous system from the mechanical injuries. So this is about the ependymal cells. Now the next type of the neuroglial cell, that is basically the peripheral neuroglial cells. So what is peripheral neuroglial cells? So these are actually the neuroglial cell that is found in our peripheral nervous system, that is called as peripheral neuroglial cells, that is found in our peripheral nervous systems. Now right in the peripheral nervous system we have two type of the neuroglial cells. The first one, that is Schwann cell, while the second one, that is called as satellite cells. Now what is the Schwann cell? Actually, why it is called a Schwann cell? Because Theodor Schwann, it is an zoologist, he discovered for the first time these cells, so that's why it is called a Schwann cell. So Theodor Schwann, it is also famous for the cell theories. Now the second point about the Schwann cell, that is about 220 to 400 micrometer in length. So this is about the length of the Schwann cell. So what is the function of the Schwann cell and the peripheral nervous systems? So the first function, that is provide myelination around the nerve fiber and the peripheral nervous systems. So right in the peripheral nervous system, the nerve fiber, it is myelinated by the Schwann cell. But in case of the central nervous system, this myelination around the nerve fiber, it is produced by the oligodendrocyte cells. Now, second function of the Schwann cell, that is play important role in the nerve regenerations. Now, what is regeneration? Regeneration means the regrowth of injured or destroyed part. So, when any type of the damage occur in the nerves, so this nerve, it is regenerated. Now these Schwann cells, they play important role at the nerve regeneration. So this is the function of the Schwann cell. Now the second type of the neuroglial cell, that is basically the satellite cells. So first of all, where this satellite cell it is present? So present on the exterior surface of the peripheral nervous system. So this is about the location where these satellite cells are present. Now what is the function of these satellite cells? The first one, that is provide physical support to the neuron and the peripheral nervous systems. So these neurons are basically surround the cell body of the neurons. So by this way it will protect the neuron of the peripheral nervous system from any type of the damages. So it will protect the neuron and the peripheral nervous systems, or you can say it will support the neuron and the peripheral nervous systems. Now the second function of the satellite cell, that is health and regulation of the chemical environment of the ECF around the neurons. Now this is basically the structure of the typical neurons. Now the environment around this neuron, it is called as extracellular fluid, ECF. Now this satellite cell, it will maintain the chemical environment of this ECFs. So this is the second function of the satellite cell. So this is overall about the neuroglial cell or glial cells. Thank you so much.